Hey guys, welcome back to another educational video. This is the youtube.com/GenericTechSupport channel. If you guys are watching this, you should know that everything we do is for educational value. All the software is purchased or used under legal availability. This channel does not promote or suggest the use of pirated software. All links are located on the Tech Guy 1 wiki page. This channel, again, is for educational purposes only. Like and subscribe for more content. I provide you guys the best practices or best experience and insight into doing things, but I don't know everything. So if you guys know something that I don't, please leave it in the comments. Thanks again for watching. Hey guys, welcome back. So we're going to start this now, but probably won't finish this until tomorrow. What we're going to do is we're going to actually promote our 2025 preview server to a domain controller, and we're going to roll through the steps to see if anything's changed from the previous versions of Windows when it comes to rolling this out as a domain controller. So for you guys that have never done this before, this may just be a learning experience for you just because you haven't done it before. It should be presumably pretty close to the same in a 2022 or 2020 or 2019 rather server. So there shouldn't be much of a difference between this and those. However, if there are, I will let you know. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go to Start. We're going to go to Server Manager. We're going to wait for this stupid bar here at the top to finish scrolling so it collects all the data and information. And then we're going to go to Add Roles and Features. Okay, so we're going to hit Add Roles and Features. We're going to skip this page by default. This will be exactly the same in 2016. Actually, probably close to the same as 2012 R2 through current. So skip this page by default. Click Next. Role-based server installation. Great. This is the IP address that we're going to use. Click Next. We're going to do Active Directory Domain Services. Add Features. We're going to go DNS Server. Add Features. We're going to choose DHCP Server. Add Features. So generally speaking, when you set up a domain controller, these are the only things that should be installed on that domain controller. That domain controller should never be a print server. That domain controller should never be a file server. It should be a DHCP server if you need it, DNS server, Active Directory Domain Services. That's it. Please do not install anything else on your domain controller. It's a colossal bad idea. File server, if those files get ransomwared, you're out of business because it'll ransomware your domain controller. If you end up installing print server and you get print nightmare on it, it'll infect the domain controller and you're out of business because it's your domain controller. Which means that you would lose DNS, you would lose DHCP, you would lose the ability to authenticate. Do not install anything other than these things on a domain controller. So we're going to click Next. Hopefully now you drilled that in. You understand why you don't do those things. Let's continue. So now we're going to go into the features area here. I'm just going to scroll to see what we got in here, if we got anything new. It looks all about the same as 2022. So we got ADDS services, DNS services, DHCP services, and we have a confirmation. So we're just going to check this box to restart it automatically when it finishes if it's necessary. We're going to click Install. So while this is installing, it's important to keep note that it's installing, but it's not configuring. So when you install these roles, you're installing the roles on the server, but you're not configuring the role configuration of the server. So it should not reboot unless there's an update or some kind of configuration required that requires the reboot. Okay, so it finished. We can see ADDS, DHCP, DNS, file services, the local server, and all services. Now, the file storage services, that's going to install automatically when we do the installation for our domain controller. Don't pay attention to it. We're not going to do anything with it. We're just going to leave it as it is. You can go up here into the flag and you see the exclamation point. We're going to promote the system to a domain controller. And we're going to add a domain controller to an existing forest? No. We're going to add a new forest. So we're going to enter a name. So for this, we're going to just do GenericSupport25.beta and choose Next. So everybody's under the impression that you have to use .com or .local or .edu or .org or whatever for your configuration. That's not necessary. So now we're at the next screen here, and interestingly enough, we have a forest in the domain function level of only 2016 or 25, which means that this server is not going to support the backwards compatibility to your 2012 environment or 2008 environment. Now that's important to keep in mind because there's a DFSR change that takes place on your domain controllers. So in order to get to 2025 server, you're going to need to be on at minimum 2016 server to get here. If not, you're going to run into issues. So don't add this as a domain controller to anything you have if you're running 2016. I mean, anything older than 2016, like 2012 R2 or 2008 R2 or God forbid 2000. Now, if you're in the 2000, 2003, 2008, you may have issues because you don't technically support the later versions of SMB. I think 2008 does, but I know 2003 does not. So you're not going to be able to communicate to those without enabling SMB1 on the newer servers. With that said, you shouldn't be using a 2025 domain controller mixed with 2003 anyway, but at any rate. For the sake of this, we're going to choose 2025 for both our domain and our forest level because we want all the newest, latest, and the greatest stuff. We want to see specifically what this thing looks like after we do the configuration. I'm going to add my DSRM password, and then I'm going to click on Next. You guys that are following this as a first step to ever create one of these things, this password is not your domain admin password. It can be anything you want to make it. It's really for the recovery purposes. I would tell you not to lose it, but really it doesn't matter. The reason why is because if you need to reset it, it's easy to reset it from the GUI as soon as you get back into the system after a reboot. So generally speaking, and also you should really change it yearly at minimum. So I digress. Anyway, let's continue on. It's going to tell us there's an error. This stupid error has existed since the beginning of time. It doesn't make any difference because if this works exactly like it did in 2012 R2 and 2016 and 2019 and 2022 server, this will still create the DNS information. It gives you an error, but it still works. So I'm not really sure why, even in this version of 2025, they still have not fixed this. So let's continue. It's going to give me what my NetBIOS name is. You could change this. We may change it. Depends on what it says. Yeah, it's too long. So what we're going to just do is GS2. There's our NetBIOS name. We'll click Next. Okay, so that's going to ask us for our locations for stuff. You could change this. I know some people that have changed it in previous companies that I worked for. It really doesn't make any difference. It doesn't cause any fixes or relieve any issues. There's nothing that's going to attack these particular locations on purpose. Putting it in a different location may give you more space for your sysvol. If you have a ton of scripts or a ton of applications you're going to run through your group policy, that might be helpful. Otherwise, it's discretion. It's up to you. It doesn't hurt anything. It doesn't fix anything. Some people tell you it's more secure to put it in other places. That's arguable because you would still have to get through the firewall, through the Windows firewall, and into the system to access them, except for the sysvol, which is shared, so it doesn't really matter where that is. But that's your call. So we're just going to continue. It's going to give us the output review of the options that we want to install. We're going to click Continue. It's going to run through the process of the script, check all the prereqs, the domain controller, and then once it's done, we're just going to click on Install. So there we go. We get the delegation error for DNS because it can't find the parent zone, which it hasn't created yet, so that's an obvious error. We're going to click on Install. It's going to install. So once this is done, it will reboot the system. And then once it reboots the system, we'll log back into it. And obviously, once we're into it, we could take a look around. We could poke around and take a look to see if there's any differences. Maybe there's differences in group policy. We'll take a look at the DNS structure. We'll take a look at the DHCP services as well. We're not going to get those running. Maybe we'll do a base configuration of some kind, but we're not going to actually get those running because we're on a shared network. There's no VLAN for this particular IP. Again, I didn't really expect to do a 2025 build. I'm still not home, and I'm on a desktop that is really kind of under-scoped for what I'm doing here, so this should be interesting to see if this actually works or finishes. Alright guys, so the system just came back up. A little slow, to be honest. Could be my hardware. Maybe not. We'll see. So now we went from using 2 gigs in the previous video to run the system with nothing on it. to now using 2 gigs as a domain controller at idle. So that's actually not bad, because now we at least have service structure on the system, and it's not just an idle system. Let's take a look at our configuration. So I love the fact that the start menu doesn't show you all apps to begin with. And I'm being sarcastic when I say this, because this is so stupid that I have to click on all apps and then I have to go search through all apps or know what the name is of the app. But I still don't have administrative tools. Yeah, so they renamed administrative tools to Windows tools. So let's pin Active Directory users and computers. Let's pin domains and trusts. The ASI edit, DHCP, group policy, DNS, so I could pin DNS to the taskbar, but I can't pin DNS to, and I can pin group policy to the taskbar, but I can't pin group policy or DNS to the start menu. Can't pin anything to the start menu. They're running oh, there we go. There's pin to start. So I have no idea why I no longer can pin things that are usable to the start menu, like DNS. Why can't I pin DNS to the start menu? Well, I can do it from here. All right, so there's clearly something wrong with the GUI in the server where you can't pin certain things to the start menu, but you can after you pin them to the task menu. Seems kind of stupid to me, but again, Windows 11. With all the bugs that Windows 11 had, they're all here now, or at least it appears so. So let's look at Active Directory users and computers, see if there's anything in here that's different. Interesting. So we have laps now built in out of the box. That's kind of cool. See the operating system, which obviously doesn't show you the service pack, which is interesting that they would leave service pack and not change it to like a roll-up, since the systems now have, you know, revisions like 21H2, 22H2, and so on and so forth. So that's interesting. For all our default built-in, there's Todd. Okay, so that looks all pretty normal. Let's go into the actual menu system here, into our settings, or rather our properties, to see if there's anything in here. So we have server function level and domain level of 2025. That's kind of neat. Let's see, our operations masters, or our FSMO role holders, are all in there as this particular system. So let's go into DNS and see if the error that it was yelling about didn't make any difference like it doesn't in any of the other systems. Sure doesn't. Works fine. Again, seems to be a bug that has existed in the server operating system for a long period of time that they still haven't fixed. Not surprised. So this is all good. All looks good. I don't have any issues, any errors. The server, IP address stuff looks good. The trusts, some of the properties. So our IPv6 and our IPv4. We don't have any forwarders configured because we're set to use root hints. Advanced, we have our root hints. Our configuration is good there. Event log, monitoring, default out-of-the-box security configuration. So this looks all good. Let's go over into our DHCP configuration. Obviously, we don't have anything configured because we don't have anything set. Generally, we would want to create server options. like a router. Can add that. Configure more options in here if we want to. Find DNS. So this is GenericTechSupport 25.beta. Apply that. So we can set our NTP servers, which is our time source. So that could be our router, or it could be, our server if we configure it for NTP. I don't have any of this stuff configured right now, but it doesn't really make any difference because there's not going to be anything connected to it. Interested in knowing what you guys set as your defaults in here. If anything outside of the norm. Leave it down in the comments. It'd be interesting to know what you guys got. I mean, obviously we could, configure our DNS servers and stuff in here too, but so we can go in here and say, all right, well, our DNS servers are always going to be 192.168.192.100, which is this system. And it's going to check. It's probably going to fail for external because we don't have this connected to the internet right now. It's just internal. Anyway, so we have DNS servers, we have NTP servers, we have our domain name. That's basically how you would configure that. And see, now what would happen is we do new scope. Next, we're going to call this one preview 25. Next, we'll do 192.168.192. I don't know, let's do 150. 192.168.192.199. We'll just leave it as class C/24. Click next. Really want to exclude anything. We're going to add a subnet delay on this thing of 5 milliseconds. The reason why you would do that typically is because you want your clients to check first before and make sure there's no duplication of IP addresses or any of that other fun stuff. 8 days is fine because there's nothing on here. No, I don't want to configure any of the scopes options, and you'll see why. We'll just click finish because now that we have our server options set, right? When we go into our scope, when we go into scope options, they're going to be identical. So if you have multiple scopes that you want to configure that are all going to use the same DNS servers, they're all going to use the same gateway, they'll all have the same information, then you add that into the server options. So anything that you need to make underneath each one of these scopes that's slightly different, you don't have to make the same 5 different or 4 different configurations on each one, which will save you time in the long run. So now that that's set, you would think, all right, well, we should now, activate the scope, and I don't really want to do that just because of what we got going on here on this particular configuration. So we can see our DNS settings. These are all, again, out of the box configured. We don't have any reverse lookup zone yet in our DNS, but we can go into name protection, click OK, click apply, go back into properties, failover, we don't have any failover, DHCP. Conflict detection, 5 milliseconds. Again, we want the system to check to see if there's any conflicted or duplicate IPs and then not issue a new IP to a device if it has an IP already, or not issue a duplicate IP so you don't end up with duplicate IPs on your infrastructure. So clearly we didn't set our settings for our DNS for reverse lookup zones. So let's do that real quick. So reverse lookup zones, we'll do new zone. Next. Say primary to all DNS servers running on domain controllers in this particular subnet. So we're just going to do 192.168.192. You write them in forward, not reverse, unless you choose the reverse lookup zone name, and then you can write them in reverse. So we're going to do both secure and unsecure because we don't have an encryption enabled. So I'm going to click on finish, and there you go. Now we got reverse lookup zone. So a quick how-to on what that reverse lookup zone actually does. We can go in here, we'll do terminal as admin. We're going to do IP config. We're going to do all. So we're going to see our IP address here of 192.168.192.100. So if we do ns lookup for generic support 25.beta, we're going to see 192.168.192.100 is generic support 25 beta. But if we do an NS lookup for 192.168.192.100, we're going to get nothing. It can't find it. So what we got to do here is we go into the reverse lookup zone, and we got to look. So we could see the reverse lookup zone with the same as parents, but if we go back into the forward and we find our 192.168.192.100, we're going to right-click on this thing and go to Properties and update the PTR record and click Apply. We're going to right-click on this, hit Properties, and make sure the Update PTR record is set. So if it's not, set it. Hit Apply, hit OK. So now if we go back over to reverse lookup zone and we refresh this, we see the IP addresses here. So if we hit the up arrow now, we see that we pull back the information for actual domain. And that's what the reverse lookup zone does. It translates the IP address into the host name, and the forward lookup translates the host name into the IP address. So now if you don't know how that works, you do know now. Okay guys, so we got our reverse lookup zone set. We got all our configuration done. Go back into our DHCP configuration here. We can look at our scope and server options and our configuration. So we right click and go back into properties of the IPv4. And we want to go into DNS. So we can do disable dynamic updates for DNS PTR records. Now if you do that, it just makes the clients that get addresses through here not use the reverse lookup zone. So you wouldn't be able to use like their host name to IP and then IP to host name. So you don't want to do that. You want to leave that as it is. And then you could do MAC filters. So you could enable deny lists. So if you do that, then you could create a deny list in here. So if you click that and apply, when you go into the scope of the configuration and filters, deny, you can actually go in here and do a new filter and add the MAC address of a device and hit right in the description. And then once you do that, the DHCP service will not give an address out to whatever has that MAC address. So that's how you create deny lists inside of the DHCP. So we don't really need to do that, so that's fine. You can do advanced filter options as well in there for configuration. So at this point, this is all set. So we can exit out of the DHCP. And now what I'd really like to jump into is group policy, because this is the part that I'm very interested in seeing what's different in our 2025 server. So interestingly enough, I don't see group policy listed. I thought I had pinned that, but it doesn't appear that I have. So let's go back in here and we'll pin to taskbar. And we'll have to right click and then pin from here to start menu, because again, the menu system seems to be broken in 2025 for some reason. Let's go to group policy management and let's take a look at group policy and see what is different in our group policy configuration in 2025 server. So right off the bat, everything looks the same. Don't see any real differences. Let's see if we can actually view this since we did uninstall Edge. Interestingly enough, even though Internet Explorer says that it doesn't exist, it clearly exists as part of the domain controller. So they haven't completely stripped it, or, again, buggy. Leaving old code behind, not updating this stuff seems really buggy. So let's add that zone, and this is what I'm talking about. This is the zone additional config that you would get, where I had stated in the previous video where we went through the actual configuration, where we had the IE enhanced security configuration. That's part of it, right? We had to add that about to it so we could actually view the configuration. Now it's interesting that it still exists, but it doesn't really still exist. So it's still part of the operating system somewhere where they haven't removed it. So group policy is still running on the old Internet Explorer configured version. So it's, again, seems buggy and poorly developed to me. Leave a comment if you disagree with me, but I got to be honest with you. I don't think I want something that seems to be pieced together poorly so far. So the interesting thing in this is that our configuration for 2025 server does not appear to have any additional configuration. Matter of fact, it's still using the 7-character configuration, which is from 2012 R2. So I don't see policy configuration changes. I do find it interesting that that is the case, though, because you would think, and obviously it's not going to show me the original creation date because of the way this thing is set up. However, we can jump into the group policy ADMX templates and see what the dates show in our ADMX templates. So maybe we should do that first to see if there's actually any changes that took place between the previous version of the domain controller with group policy and our newer version on 2025 server. So we're going to just go to Windows, System 32. Group policy. So we don't have any policies by default configured to our domain controller, which is interesting. Also, maybe equally as interesting is that the folder is no longer hidden, where it used to be in the previous versions of Windows. So we're going to go back into Windows. We're going to go policy definitions. And then we're going to arrange by date. So we have a couple of policy definitions that look like they were applied today. I'm assuming these were downloaded today when we did the update. However, everything else that's in here is old. It's also interesting how Microsoft copied the stuff on April 1st, April Fool's Day, into the actual system at 4:11 a.m., but would do it in such a way that they wouldn't copy the original creation date. Because, oh God, I hate the menu system in Windows 11. Because if we go into a 2019 server and take a look at these same policy definitions, I'm going to assume that we'll probably see something different. So let's take a look and compare this to a 2019 server. Okay guys, so let's do a comparison real quick. Right? So we're going to actually go back up here and we're going to realign these things by name. We're going to do the same thing on this side. So we do have one, which is account notifications, which is different than the 1809 version, right? So we have 220 items on the left, and we have 210 items on the right. So presumably there's 10 different policies on the left-hand side than there are on the right. So now we just got to figure out what the difference is between the two of these things. And honestly, the easiest way to do this is through command line and do a comparison of the output of the text. So you could do a dir and then dir that actual information to a notepad and then compare the notepad documentation between the two locations to figure out what's missing from one to the other. You may compare software that does that. Makes it real easy to do it. But let's see if we could just figure out some of it here. So we have account notifications. We have allow build preview, which we have that there. App compat. All right, so we have an app device inventory. So that might be interesting. The question is what do we have in our actual policy? So let's go into our group policy configuration itself. And let's create a new policy. So let's do new and test. Let's drill into this thing and see what we got as far as some changes. I mean, there's presumably going to be changes in here because, again, we have 10 different policies between the two of them. So we should be able to figure out specifically where those policies are and do a quick look to see what those are. So I want to just give an update. I did go through these things and I did a side-by-side comparison between the two of them. And I do notice that we do have a 10 difference, but it's not that simple. So we actually have configuration on the new server that doesn't, well, it doesn't exist on the new server, and it does exist on the old servers. So it appears that while we do have changes, we don't have, like, for instance here, we had a, where is it? So we'll scroll up here, we'll do, well, we don't have P2P, right? So there is no P2P. I'm not bugging, right? I mean, that's, you guys don't see it, do you? Because I sure as heck don't. So we don't have a P2P PNRP ADMX file, which from 2018 seems to be gone on our 2025 server. So it appears that we don't have an exact one-to-one as far as the configuration is concerned. So the update for 2025 server actually strips some of our configuration settings that we had in our 2019 server, which is interesting because presumably you're still going to need to control Windows 10 unless what they're banking on is that the 2025 server doesn't support Windows 10, that it's specifically designed for Windows 11 configuration and group policy, and you would need the older ADMX template configuration in order to apply to your new server in order to get the same controls to control everything. So I might actually look into this and create a master template of all the ADMX and ADML files for all versions of Windows in one simplified location, so that way you could grab them all to add them to your server, because based off of what I see, we're missing configuration in the 2025 server. Now, whether or not that configuration has been moved elsewhere, that's possible, or it is also possible that it's been added to a different configuration. Like, for instance, some of these things are different sizes, so it's possible that we have additional configuration in there. But let's see if we could find something different. I think where we'll start is Windows Update, because that's generally something they change in every version of the server. Okay, so we're in the Windows Update policy now, so let's dig and see if there's any differences in here. So we have a legacy policy configuration. Let's just go into here and see what legacy actually means. So it's interesting they put XP Service Pack 1, because this thing cannot see XP Service Pack 1. So it's really stupid to put that. Not supported on Windows 10 and above. So it only supports Windows 8.1, but then we're missing configurations in ADMX templates to control the older operating systems. So once again, seems kind of a mess. Let's see what we have as far as the newer stuff is concerned. Turn off auto update for updates during active hours. Great. Specify active hours range for auto updates. Remove the access to pause. Remove access to the all Windows updates features. Update the power policy. These are all, for the most part, this is all stuff that existed in the previous versions of Windows, at least 2022. Again, you could run a 2008 R2 box and grab these ADMX templates and put them in a 2008 R2 box and control a Windows 10 and 11 machine, no problem. So don't think that you have to have the latest server in order to control the Windows 10 and 11 machines. You do temporarily, so you can grab those templates, or you need a Windows 11 machine that you grab the templates from, because the templates exist in the client machines as well. But you don't need the server necessarily to control the later clients. With that said, if you're running like 2008 R2 and you haven't updated the ADMX template since 2008 R2, and that was designed for Windows 7, you probably have a bunch of problems in your Windows 11 systems that you don't even know about. With that said, let's continue on here. So specify intranet location for Microsoft Update Location Services. So this is the policy that you would use if you wanted to decline all Windows updates on systems on your infrastructure, because it's really easy. You just enable this and set the location to https://127.0.0.1, and then do like colon and then the port number of 80 and hit apply, and that will force the local policy on the local desktop to always look at itself for Windows updates, thus breaking Windows updates and not allowing the system to get any updates. Automatic update detection, client-side targeting, allowing signed updates from the intranet location, yada, yada, yada. So now we're in the Manage Updates Offered by Windows Update. So enable optional updates, select the preview builds, disable safeguards for feature updates, do not include drivers with Windows updates. That should be just turned on by default, but it's not. Manage preview builds, select target feature update version. So this is where you would go if you're on like a Windows 10 machine, right? You want to say like only update Windows 10 to like 22 H2 and put in here Windows 10. And then you hit apply. What that'll do is now if it finds a Windows 10 machine, it will only update it to 22 H2. In other words, they won't get the prompt for the upgrade the system to Windows 11 garbage anymore, because the system is now forced to only use that specific version. So that said, I actually don't see anything different in here, with the exception of now a legacy policy setting, which moved the policy settings from just the Windows Update location into a legacy policies folder. But it's all the same stuff. We don't have anything different in here between one server and the next. perhaps one of the most important things in the latest policy update is the addition of the Copilot configuration, which is under your Windows user configuration, administrative templates, Windows components. And then here you're going to actually look for Microsoft, or rather Windows Copilot, and that gives you the ability to disable the Copilot on the client machines. Why this exists as a user policy is just so stupid. So you got to understand that user policies don't apply on the fly. They require a logon, and you actually have to be connected to the domain in order to download the policy. So it's not like a computer policy where it does it on the fly and allows you to change the setting. It requires a reboot and an authenticated logon into the system to disable it. So that means like your users that would be remote clients connected through VPN, this crap will never apply. So it means that they'll still have access to it. Because once again, poorly developed, poorly thought out. It's just not a well-designed application or operating system. They want you to use this stuff, and they make it difficult for you to disable it because they want to collect data about you in order to market, and it's not even market. They want to collect data about you to sell. They're looking to sell information about who you are, what you do, what you use your computer for, so they can market things through third-party companies and make money off of you. That's why this junk exists. So the reality is that they're making it more difficult to disable it. So my thought in this operating system was we were going to find advanced Copilot configurations for group policy through the actual Windows computer configuration. But the fact that it exists down here underneath the user configuration settings and group policy tells me right away that it's amateur hour. I mean, I wouldn't trust them to actually secure your data. The fact that this exists down here and doesn't exist up here, it's just proof that they don't know what they're doing. So I figured just for S and giggles, I should at least show you, right? So we got Copilot, which is there. We can disable it. Great. Under user configuration. But if we go into our computer configurations, administrative templates, we don't have Copilot. We don't have any AI features of any kind. So we don't have a way to, on the fly, disable that junk. So if this machine doesn't have access, doesn't have the policy, or even if it wanted to, say, use it for whatever reason, it just doesn't exist. We do have a new policy, though, called human presence. So it's an interesting configuration. I got to be honest with you. A lot of this new stuff that's coming out, it just doesn't look like it's well thought out. It's scary to me because as somebody that's spent the vast majority, more than half my life, on Microsoft configurations and security, I wouldn't trust them. I mean, not even a little bit with this whole configuration. Now, with that said, maybe this will change. Maybe they'll see this video and they'll say, you know what, he's right. We really got to change this. We got to make sure that we add the configurations into the computer configuration, because that'll allow us to actually secure clients that are remote. But they don't think about this stuff. This is not thought out, not thought through. And the fact that this still requires Internet Explorer in order for us to actually view the configuration in the policy, it tells me right away that they genuinely don't know what they're doing. They really don't. So at this point, this is Active Directory. Now, we should install a file server, add a print server, and take a look at that. But we'll do that on a different server. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and seeing what this is, I mean, which is really a very unpolished beta at this point. Hopefully they fixed it, and I would love to revisit this at some point to see if they actually resolve any of these issues, but I really don't have too much hope for it, just because most of these bugs have existed for close to 10 years. So I really don't have much hope that they're going to fix anything. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. You guys excited for this AI transition? Let me know. All right, guys, take it easy.